2 minutes ago. So allow me to have the honor to present our speaker for today, Ambassador Generoso Calogne. Alam nyo, napakayabang ng mga, when my apologies to my fellow PMAers who are attending, mayabang yung mga PMAer. Hindi nag-a-adapt kagad ng members sa klase. But when we look at the record of Ambassador Calonge when he was still on a company grade, we were impressed, and we adopted him to our class, PMA Matapat class of 1979. So allow me to continue my introduction. Ambassador Calonge is a career diplomat whose service in the Department of Foreign Affairs spans more than 36 years. He has served in the Philippine diplomatic missions, 5 of them as head of post in the United States, Russia, United Arab Emirates, as well as in several offices in Manila. Ambassador Calonge served in Israel for 3 years before his assignment to Chicago as Consul General in the summer of 2014. He completed his tour of duty abroad in late January 2018. Before assignment in Baghdad, he served as Assistant Secretary for Maritime and Ocean Affairs in Manila. And you know how hot that assignment is, especially the West Philippine Sea. He earned his bachelor's degree in economics from the University of the Philippines in 1976. Completed his degree in law also from the University of the Philippines in 1985, and then moved on to finish his Master's of Laws from Harvard Law School in 1988. Ambassador Calonge served as an officer in the Philippine Army for 6 years before joining the Philippine Foreign Service. He topped the Career Minister examination in 1998. He graduated from the Australian Army's Officer Cadet School at Fort Sea in 1979, and he placed number 1 in the Philippine Army's Scout Ranger class number 33. Ambassador Calonge holds the rank of Commodore in the Philippine Coast Guard Auxiliary. He has reserved commission in the Philippine Army as a Lieutenant Colonel. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Ambassador Generoso DG Calogne.
Hello, can you hear me?
Clear.
Clear, okay. First of all, I'd like to thank General Yocado Santiago for his very kind introduction. If I may add a small detail to that introduction, actually, I also belong really to class 79 because I spent summer camp there before resigning my appointment as a cadet and went back to the University of the Philippines. So their adoption of me as an associate member formalized my membership with that class, although I knew a lot of people in class 79, even before us going up to Baguio. Second, I would like to make a disclaimer about this presentation that I'm expressing here only personal views and may not reflect necessarily on the institutions that I represent. So I do not speak here on behalf of our embassy in Baghdad, the Foreign Service, or even the Department of Foreign Affairs. These are vignettes of my experiences, and I would like to share them with you because as most of you are in government or retired from government, I think we share the same aspiration to keep our country prosperous, to keep our people happy, and to keep them safe in the years ahead. The topic that was given to me by General Santiago, as I heard it, is current international perspective towards the Philippines. I take that subject as meaning the way the Philippines is perceived in international circles. That's how I get the topic, and therefore I would like to let you know about what we do abroad and what components of those tasks that we do are relevant to you, especially in your perceptions of our country. Earlier, General Santiago was telling me that much of the misperception of the DFA has centered on OFWs. Actually, that's quite a deficient way of looking at the DFA, because our approach towards OFWs is just 1/3 or even less of our day-to-day functions. Our mission is anchored on 3 pillars. The first one is on national security, and then the second one is on economic development, and the last, but certainly not the least one, is assistance to nationals, under which concerns on OFW matters are centered. So you see, the first 2 are really big in our agenda anywhere we go. Now, the perception of the Philippines abroad is also reflected in our history. And what I'm telling you come from open sources. I did not access any report from any diplomatic establishment that we have, or even from the department. These are all open information that you know. And any reasonable foreign service in Manila, like the embassies and consulates, most probably have reported on these matters to their home governments. But for historical background, I'd like to trace for you what our country is all about in its rise as a nation, as a modern nation. And we begin, I suggest we begin in the year 1896. This will be a very fast review of our state as a nation. As we all know, the Philippine Revolution started in 1896. And at the time, our search for nationhood was still trying to crystallize. And of course, there's a lot of disunity, there's a lot of disagreement, and there is a certain feeling that we are not yet a real nation at that time. And for this purpose, I'd like to invite you to see, if you can, 2 movies. I don't know, many of you may have seen them because they are practically related to what we do. One is the movie about General Luna, and the other one is a movie about General Del Pilar. From my personal assessment, these 2 movies are accurate, except for the dramatization of the events that transpired in those days. And it gives you those movies give you a background that the state of affairs in the Philippines today are deeply rooted in our past. Okay, if you recall, in the convention in Tejeros, I think it was in Tejeros, in Cavite, Andres Bonifacio was nominated to be Secretary of War. and the elite at the time who were members of that convention objected, so that he had to step down summarily, and then somebody nominated him again to be Secretary of Interior, Minister of Interior, and again the elite, the rich people who belonged to the convention, objected to such an appointment. After which he walked out and brought his followers with him, and as you know, the rest is history. So even then, even at that early stage of our history, we have disunity. There is no national consensus about certain approaches to government that would have been deemed to be good for the country. For example, if you look at the writings of Mabini, he had noted that General Aguinaldo, who then became President Aguinaldo, only favored a certain few in the structure of the fledgling Philippine army at that time. So I am sure if you are a foreigner, if you belong to the consulates here, I don't think there was a foreign embassy here at that time, you would report on these events, because the subsequent killing of Luna already showed the primary weakness of our country, and that is his professionalism was frowned upon by certain sectors within the armed forces at the time, the army at the time. They didn't want to be disciplined. They only wanted to get orders from President Aguinaldo himself, and because Luna, if you know, Luna trained in Belgium under one of the best Belgian professors of military science, and he knew what he was doing, especially on fortifications. That was his specialty. So he was good in defensive actions, and also his withdrawals were almost perfect. He kept his units intact to fight another day. But those were not appreciated. That's why in their field reports, the American troops, I think those were led by General Otis at the time, they noted that we only have one real general, and that was Luna. So, okay, these were reported to a foreign government, so they knew how fractious our society is, our leadership is, even at that time. Now we move forward a little bit to the war against Spain, and eventually the war against the United States. In the war against Spain, you will notice that the Spaniards have a very low regard for Filipinos. Do you know why? Because they sold our country to the Americans for $20 million. 20 million is, of course, is also big money at that time, but it only shows that we are like, in law, there's something, we are like a cattle, for example, that can be sold to another jurisdiction. And then, worse, that was in 1898 in the Treaty of Paris, where right now that's a very current treaty because of the conflict in the South China Sea, the Treaty of Paris lines. And then, to make it worse, in the year 1900, a sequel to the Treaty of Paris is the Treaty of Washington. Very few people know about this. In the Treaty of Washington, the Americans said to the Spaniards that there are a few islands and islets and features that are not accounted for in the Treaty of Paris. So what the Spaniards did was, okay, we will give you all these features, these islands, but you must give us more money. So, so the Americans paid another sum. I forgot what was the amount, but it was much less than 20 million, of course. So we were like chattel, not like cattle also, you know. Chattel, we are like, to those of you who are lawyers or taking up law, you know what the word chattel means. You can be moved around and purchased by another person. So they did not really hold us in high regard. And then during the American occupation, of course, there was no stability in the first, I think, in the first 16 years, because the Katipuneros and the revolutionaries, who were really patriots to us, if you're really a loyal Filipino, you will deem them patriots. But they were called brigands, they were called insurrectos, they were called outlaws, like Macario Sakay, who was really trying to continue the struggle against foreign domination. So even in those days, I'll advise you, if you go to Washington, one of these days for the duration of your military and civilian service in government, you try going to the U.S. Archives in Washington, D.C. along, I think it's along Connecticut Avenue. And in those days, there weren't any computers yet. So I went there and saw by microfilm the expression of loyalty from Batanes to Jolo of the various leaders of Filipinos who expressed confidence and loyalty in the leadership of General Aguinaldo. Our evolution as a nation was starting at the time, and even our Muslim brothers, you can see there were dispatches. There were already telegrams in those days, and there were telegrams expressing support for Aguinaldo. I saw them with my own eyes. You used the microfilm at the time, but I don't know how it is done now. So you try going there, you will see the roots of our development as a nation. Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, the leadership kind of bungled our unification initiatives. Even before the Phil-Am War, the U.S. intention was really to occupy the country. But we were not really astute diplomats at the time, because their consuls in Hong Kong and in Singapore made ambivalent remarks to our revolutionaries. For example, in Singapore, I forgot the name of the consul there, they were saying that they will only help us eject the Spaniards, and they will leave us alone. So we were too naive to believe that. The intention was really to occupy the country, and as a result, when on May 1st, Admiral Montojo was so-called defeated, although I don't think there was a real battle in Manila Bay at the time. When the Americans were trying to consolidate their hold on Manila, their first target was to get ashore, and then to occupy Intramuros, which was the seat of government at the time. And here in this area where I live now, near Malati Church, they occupied this. Their initial beachhead was in this place. And General Luna was really smart, because he recommended formally to General Aguinaldo to attack the Americans at that point, because he believed that eventually they will be pushed back. And history proved him correct, because later, as the U.S. volunteers were coming from the United States, various parts of the United States, they keep pushing back. The Filipinos themselves voluntarily push back up to San Juan, what is now San Juan. And Aguinaldo denied the recommendation of Luna, believing that the US will not colonize the country. So I'm sure these were indicated to the U.S. War Department and to the U.S. State Department at the time that the Americans were making headway in their attempt to land in force in the Philippines. During the Commonwealth, we moved forward. The Philippines, I can see from reports and from figures that the economy, that the Philippines enjoyed economic prosperity at that time. Our elite had, would you believe, history has reversed itself. We have had servants. Our Philippine elite have had servants from China. They call them the AMA, A-M-A-H, I think. That's the term for a servant. But now, of course, you know what's going on in places like Hong Kong. But the problem was our products, sugar, rice, the basic agricultural products, competed with the products of the American Midwest. In the Chicago area, the Midwest, that's about 12 or 14 states in the American Midwest, produce the same product. So actually, while we Filipinos were searching for independence using the law, first the Jones Law and eventually the Thaddeus-McDuffie Law, we had an ally in the American Midwestern states who wanted us to be given independence as soon as possible. So they never felt an attachment to the Philippines because we competed economically with them. Now we move on to the Second World War. The United States is really an old ally of the Philippines by that time. But one of our patriots, I don't know if it was Quezon, I forgot, expressed negative sentiments about the way the United States treated us after the Japanese occupation, after the Japanese landed in the Philippines. People like MacArthur advocated the return of the Americans first in the Philippines and the retaking of any other territory later. In my opinion, he did that for two reasons, and both of them are personal reasons. I don't know if they're grounded on strategy, which I doubt. First, his father served here as a military governor of the Philippines, and he himself served here. But he was a very strong advocate of retaking of the Philippines ahead of any other American territory. But he was overruled. And so one of our leaders, I think it was, if it wasn't Quezon, it must be somebody else, Usmeña maybe, who said that the US left the Philippines and it favored the liberation of Europe. And he made an analogy that the United States was trying to liberate an occupied cousin while a daughter is being raped in her own home. Something like that. He was saying that we should have occupied a higher rung of importance in the American landscape. But of course, that's not feasible because, as you know, especially in those days, most of the the Americans came from Europe. That's where they migrated from the English, and later on from the entire Western Europe. So again, the level of importance accorded to us leaves a lot to be desired. In the Korean War, we participated as part of the UN contingent, and we excelled there. We also did that in Vietnam. We also had excellent pilots in the Congo. And we can claim victory in all of these three: Korean War, Vietnam, and Congo. But do you know what is the common denominator in all three? In all three experiences of the armed forces on behalf of the UN, we were equipped with top-of-the-line gear at that time. For example, during the Korean War, we were whatever the Allies had, we also had. Okay, and so, which goes to show that economic strength is important in nation building. And we must have seen the deterioration of the armed forces, the equipment of the armed forces later, especially the Navy and the Air Force, and that led to a neglect in part of our defense and armed forces policy that also affects, because that is the backbone of Philippine foreign policy. If we speak overseas in international forums, it's because we have confidence in our strength. But I'm not sure if we can do that at this time. In Iraq, for example, during the American invasion in 2003 to oust Saddam Hussein, we joined the coalition of the willing to help in the war effort. We sent, I think, a contingent of 50 personnel. But the kidnapping of Angelito de la Cruz in Western Iraq at the time led to our precipitate withdrawal, and President George Bush was not very happy with that decision, because we are afraid to lose Filipino lives in the desert of Iraq. And so, what is my overview of all these things? We have had our days, our glorious days in the perception of foreign countries of the Philippines. Why? Because we have been a founding member of the UN. We are a founding member of the ASEAN. We are very active in almost all foreign forums that are out there, including the UNAMI, United Nations Assistance Mission in Iraq, ILO, UNICEF, formerly ICC, but we withdrew from ICC. So what are the positive things in favor of the Philippines? One, we are the first republic in Asia, or so we claim, you know. Second, we are heavily involved in the United Nations operations, involved in peacekeeping. And I saw this myself firsthand in the Philippine involvement in the Golan Heights. We also have presence in Sudan, Korea, East Timor, Cambodia. So we have a good international reputation. We are a good multilateral partner in the community of nations. But what are the, I would say, the things or the matters that leave much to be desired in the perception of countries, of other countries towards us? The way I look at it right now, we have very few initiatives in the international arena, except on issues centering on OFWs. Second, we are an outlier in ASEAN. Although we are a founding member, we are missing a lot of the importance that ASEAN has been accorded by the international community. There have been unconfirmed rumors in the past that back in its founding in 1967, it is alleged, I haven't seen any written proof of this, that the headquarters of ASEAN was offered to President Marcos, but he passed the opportunity to Indonesia. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard it quite a number of times. Right now, our economy is not performing well, but before the pandemic, we have had tremendous economic growth, about 6 to 7% annually. That was quite impressive in Asia and Southeast Asia. But the pandemic, which is beyond our control, has interfered in our economic progress. There is a certain law that was very much appreciated by World Bank and the IMF that we were able to pass, and we have successfully implemented, and that is the VAT law, the value-added tax law, because that's a tremendous achievement, because it gave to the coffers of government income that can be used for various purposes. So do we have unsustainable growth? I think if we just overcome this pandemic, I think we can go back to our former trajectory of 6 to 7% growth. Now, what I'm going to tell you is a reflection of our national character. Do we have Ningas Kugon in our country? Because I say this because we have had so many government initiatives that did not succeed, have not succeeded, and they have had affinity with scandals. For example, and these are just a few, those of you who have retired for a long time know of this. And these are, for example, the RCA, Rice and Corn Administration, the NAMARCO, National Marketing Corporation, Masagana 99, the first attempt to modernize the armed forces, the sale of Fort Bonifacio. And note that we have had elections since the 1900s, and we haven't perfected the conduct of elections. In the Philippines, a loser always ends up being cheated in the elections. So there's not a single result that we can say that the election is fair and square. Every defeated candidate in our country says that he has been cheated. Is that reflective of the way we accept the result of the contest that is legitimately conducted pursuant to our constitution? So we have very few victories to be proud of. I'm sorry to say, as kababayans, I can tell you that I'm not very proud of some of our defeats. For example, Tirad Pass, the Palanan capture of Aguinaldo. These two incidents can really naturally occur because in battle, somebody has to lose. But in these two incidents, it was Filipinos themselves who led the occupying power to those defending our side. In Tirad Pass, there were Macabebe scouts that revealed the back entry to where Del Pilar was having his defensive positions. Same is true in Palanan, Isabela. There were Filipinos who led Major Funston to capture Aguinaldo. So What about successes? Yes, we have had successes. Can we consider Marawi a success? I think so, but there's a lot of foreign assistance in Marawi, including the use of modern equipment. The anti-hook campaign, yes, I think that was a success. But the winner there, in Central especially, was, I think, economic prosperity, because once the area, Central Luzon, developed, the way the cities there, like San Fernando and Bebesia area, Tarlac, Pampanga, when they tasted economic prosperity, I think that removed the steam out of the Hukbalahak movement. MNLF campaign, was that a success? Partially, but it was, we were assisted there by King Hassan of Morocco, who helped negotiate the Tripoli Agreement in 1977. So it was both a political and partial military victory. MILF talks that led to the BARMM, maybe it's probably a victory, but to some, the curious role of our neighboring country should be examined more forcefully. These perceptions that I have about our country is not confined to it's not really confined to the peace and order situation, our defense posture, but it reflects our character as a nation. And I will pose to you the challenge of next year, when we will have another election, and we should choose the leaders that our country deserves, because our people, in my opinion, have suffered long enough, and we have to face the future with pride and confidence, and with the intelligence that we exhibit when our OFWs go to other countries. So with that, I'd like to entertain your questions, and thank you very much, especially to General Santiago for giving me the opportunity to share my experience in foreign countries, and what, in my view, would have been the perception of foreign countries towards the Philippines. Salamat po, and mabuhay ang Pilipinas.
Thank you, Ambassador Jean Calonge, for that. And now to the participants, we have a total of 147 participants. Actually, some of the 47s are in Google Meet. Because unfortunately, Zoom, even though I paid for 500 participants, they have not yet updated my account. So there's the participants are encouraged to ask questions while Ambassador Calonge is with us, and things that you think are relevant, especially to your work and understanding you want to understand.
Jen, I think we have one comment here from the chat box. Galaxy A30. Question po. So I think we would like to acknowledge Galaxy A30.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
You can speak now.
Yeah, please.
Baka naka-mute.
Nabasa ko yung sinabi niya, taga-tourism industry daw sa tourism industry. Okay, the question was, can I give a what I perceive to be developments in the tourism industry? That's an excellent question that has a big bearing on our economy. Do you know that there are some countries whose real foundation is their tourism industry? For example, Spain, Portugal, France, some of the countries in the old Yugoslavia, like what they call those countries there, Serbia, Bosnia. Those countries have very good sources of income in their tourism industry. Of course, we don't have to mention New Zealand, Australia, United States, because in those countries they have professionalized the industry, and also especially in countries like Portugal. There is a consensus among the Portuguese that their tourism industry must redound to the benefit of their country. So they take care of tourists. They don't maltreat or mistreat tourists. Of course, in Europe, if you have traveled in Europe, you find, especially in Italy, in Rome, the cities of Rome, and I think in Spain also, you find the occasional pickpockets, the occasional I don't know, hold up or maybe, but pickpockets. There are a lot of them in the trains in the Rome area. So you just have to be careful. But I'm sure those are heavily punished if they get caught. And let us make our country, the entire country, a tourist industry. It's not like right now we're just planning only to have Ermita, Malate, Luneta, Fort Santiago as tourist sites. Let's make Cubao a tourist site. Let us make San Fernando, Pampanga a tourist site. So tourism is, in fact, a self-sustaining industry, because by minor investments of, for example, peace and order, souvenir shops, and small historical markers here and there, there are serious tourists who read everything that they can see along the route of tourist spots. For example, from here all the way to Pangasinan, we can trace the route of Aguinaldo and Luna, talking about our heroes. Luna established defensive positions in Bulacan. Where were those? We can put a marker there. We can put a small pathway, and then a recording saying the significance of that place. I think any number of imaginative acts can also, help recoup the investment in these sites, and also encourage visitors from all over the world. Tirad Pass, we can go to Tirad Pass if there's a way of going there, or Besang Pass. That's a famous battle in Second World War. Or yeah, so the tourism industry, if that is the thrust of your question, could be made a cornerstone of the Philippine economy. And I think the figures now are very promising, because in 1995, I think, or 97, I was Consul General in Saipan, a small island in the Pacific. That island, very small, it's only as big as the city of Manila, not Metro Manila, had 1 million arrivals a year. It's just a drop in the Pacific. And at that time, our figures are 2 million a year. So how many Saipans can we include in the entire Philippine territory? It's amazing. But I think our numbers now are improving. I think we are now in the 5-6 million area. So we are moving, but the pace is the pace needs improvement.
Ambassador
Yeah.
Jin,
Yes.
in context of our being well, I'm sorry, but I have to ask, in the context of West Philippine Sea, what do our foreign counterparts look at the Philippines in terms of its claim or its action?
I have been out of West Philippine Sea issues for more than a year now. What I see in the open media, open sources, is that, for example, the comments from Australians, I think some Singaporeans, Japanese, Koreans, some say that we need to have an imaginative approach to preserving the decision of the tribunal in The Hague in 2016. So they think that we are losing it, but the president said that it's now part of international law, and no country can remove it from the books. So, but I think we have to be proactive. The foreign governments and foreign countries who are fielding their naval vessels in the South China Sea are doing it for their own purposes, for their own national interests, but in a certain way, they're also reinforcing the decision of the International Tribunal, because they can they need to comply with the dimensions required of their presence in the seas. For example, they should comply with the 12-mile limit of the territorial sea, and then another 12 miles for the contiguous zone, and the total of 200 miles for exclusive economic zone. So, but I think I am certain that they are wondering why we are not that proactive in enforcing the decision. But that's just my assessment of what they say.
Actually, I asked that because in view of the U.S. Going out of the Afghanistan area,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they want to recover some of the prestige that is now being blackened in the media also, or in other supposedly friends. That's why I asked about that, because we cannot foresee what their actions now, because that's the only avenue open to show that they stand by for those they have taken as partners in their battles or in their wars. Thank you, Ambassador.
Well, a superpower like the US will not run out of crisis worldwide. The one looming crisis is Iran. There's a statement that I saw somewhere that the production level and production capacity to achieve a weapon grade capability of their nuclear arsenal has been enhanced from a certain percentage to a higher one, and that might lead to a scenario where the U.S. and its major ally in the region, which is Israel, may take the actions that they feel would be conducive towards preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. But publicly and repeatedly, time and again, the Israelis have said that they will prevent at all costs, at any cost, that they will prevent the attempt of Iran to acquire nuclear weapons. They have said that it's part of their foreign policy approach towards Iran. So there are other crises in Kashmir, between India and China. Or else there's still a country in Africa that's in turmoil right now. There's it's close to, I think Sudan is almost over if they still have instability there, but there's a country where there's a secessionist movement again. Ano ba pangalan ng bansang yun? There's trouble there. There are many countries where, of course, our backyard is also may also be dangerous if you can look at it that way. But I don't want to sound alarmist, but with the presence of so many vessels in the South China Sea, you might wonder if there might be collisions or inappropriate actions by certain vessels that might lead to something more drastic. So let's just pray that cooler heads will intervene and resort to the negotiating table to settle disputes.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think this chat group their question.
Yeah.
Doc Mac, pakibasa.
Good morning, Ambassador. Ryan Layog said that he is proud of our soldiers. I think that we are all vouching that pride, no, for our soldiers. The question here is that we are so rich in history, but lack documentation of our history. So how do we correct this?
We are rich in history, but lacking documentation in history. And then what's the subsequent phrase?
How do we correct this?
How do we correct it?
Yeah, when we go to other foreign countries, museum muna ang pinupuntahan natin, no? But I think in the Philippines, we are not of that keen, no, in moving around, no, with what we have, or in some cases na-erase na ang ating documentation ng history.
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. That question is also close to my heart because when I was assigned in MCMTC, I was aide de camp to the CG of MCMTC. But I was also made concurrently the command historical officer, but command historian. I think that's the name of the assignment. And I discovered through the National Historical Institute that our building in the old MCMTC at the edge of the golf course in the old Fort Bonifacio was the headquarters of General Douglas MacArthur in 1911, I think, or 1912, in what was then called, it's a U.S. Army unit, but it's composed of Filipino soldiers, but with American officers, Philippine Scouts, Philippine Department of blank division. I forgot the name of what division. And he held office there. And in coordination with the National Historical Commission, they validated that indeed that was the headquarters of General MacArthur. So in a very, very big ceremony where the entire Defense Attaché Corps was invited by General Fabian Ver, no less, I made a marker that was approved by the National Historical Commission. It's like a 2-foot marker with a big narrative. You know, the usual historical commission narrative saying that this is the headquarters of General MacArthur, so and so, Philippine Department, U.S. Army. And when Bonifacio was sold, the entire building, of course, was bulldozed, and that small marker was not even spared. It's very small. And so we are not really conscious of our history. And that's a place that Westerners would like to visit, I think, especially Americans who still have a fondness for the Philippines. So you're right. But I understand that each major command has a historian, right? Historical officer, and the army has a historical office. So my more serious concern actually is whether or not the people who occupy their offices are serious in their job, and are they really writing up accurate history? Because sometimes our history is not very, very accurate, or at least it needs refinement. Okay, for example, if you read accounts of our withdrawal to Bataan, you will see that the accounts paint us to be very glorious in our defense of Bataan. But there are certain inputs in that narrative that are not entirely accurate, because when the reservists, most of them are OTC cadets, withdrew to Bataan from, let's say, from Manila, some of the bridges were blown up before they were able to cross towards the Bataan Peninsula. There were incidents like those. And then it is also said that we faced the Japanese gallantly. Yes, I have no doubts about that. We're a brave people. And if you look at the movies of Fernando Po, we machine gunned companies of them, you know, wave after wave of Japanese. But of course, that's just a movie. But what I'm driving at here is that there should be a little footnote there that those the 14th Army elements under General Homa were veterans in China before they were here, and they were heavily equipped. They were good. They had experience in warfare. So it's not true that we were battling the Japanese who were not very good, who were, you know, they were, the General Homa's troops were veterans, but we are also good because we were able to delay their timetable, and by a good 3 months. But painting them as villains, that they do what they're doing, there should be a footnote there saying that, you know, these are also seasoned troops of the Japanese Imperial Army. In order to have a true picture of history, you must be able to paint both sides without being unfair to your side.
Yeah. Thank you,
Okay.
thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
just
you.
to in line with national pride and sense of nationalism. One question here is that given the upcoming elections, what breed of leaders do we need to elect to recover a sense of pride, given the many positive firsts that we have? Salamat po.
Yeah. I think I cannot answer that question by myself. That question must be posed to the entire Filipino electorate. If our voters could easily be convinced that 1,000 pesos or 500 pesos will rule their life in the next 6 years, then we are back to square one. If we are convinced, if our voters are convinced that singing or dancing on stage and being good looking is an asset in one's political career, then we will be stuck with what we have. And in short, I would only say that we get a nation that we deserve. We get a type of leadership that we deserve because of the way we express our will in the ballot. Because each person has only one ballot, has only one vote. So your power is as good as mine. Okay.
Yes,
But
thank you.
I recommend to you that I think it's in YouTube. I recommend to you that you watch the statements of Lee Kuan Yew in references to ASEAN, to the Philippines, and he had something to say about Philippine leadership and the Philippine situation. And I also had a personal experience in this. When I was stationed in Washington, D.C. as Consul General there, we had a Singaporean ambassador who was of Indian descent. He eventually got, after his tour, he got recalled and became head of their, the equivalent of their NICA in Singapore. And he even became the president of Singapore. He told me, because he treated me like a son, because in most of our meetings in those days, I was the youngest, and he was the oldest. And when we were seated side by side, because the ASEAN rotates, chairmanship in ASEAN rotates, even in other capitals. So he said, Congen, he said, Consul General, what happened to your country? You know, when I was a young officer in the Foreign Service, I saw the founding of ASEAN, and I saw your leaders. I saw them speak. I saw the way they took the lead in ASEAN. But what happened? And we look up to the Philippines as a place to go, as a place to visit. So I don't know. I forgot what I said, but deep in my heart, I was just saying that those were the days. But I could not say those very frank assessments, of course, even of my own country. And also there was a Malaysian ambassador. His name, I remember his name, Ambassador Majid, M-A-J-I-D. He is the Malaysian ambassador to Washington, and he took his master's in political science in UP in Diliman in the 60s. And he said, you know what he told me? Whenever he is in Manila, his parents took pains to invite him back to Kuala Lumpur to take a vacation because he would rather be in Manila. He said, you have very wide boulevards. I think he was referring to what is now what we named Quezon Avenue, Quezon Boulevard, the one that leads from the Welcome Rotonda all the way to Diliman. He called that very, very big. There's no one like that in Malaysia, he said. So imagine how people regarded us, how foreigners, how foreign diplomats, how people who had a say in their own countries venerated us in a way. And so you try, I suggest to you that as a
Okay na po. Thank you po.
who asked this question, by the way? The question about leadership, type of leadership that we should have. Who asked this question? May I know?
This is a question coming from Alfred Lindsay Mapilisan.
Deposit lang, ma'am.
Yeah. What agency does he belong to? May I know?
Can we have Alfred to speak? Alfred is recognized.
Well, I think that we'll not waste too much time. I'm not trying to put him on the spot, but I suggest to him that, and to all of you, if you have the time, that you take a look at the biographies of certain leaders that may have an impact on your agency or on your or on our government. And some biographies are too ancient to be relevant today. For example, I have read the biography of Alexander the Great, but of course he's a good leader. But in his day, if he didn't want the resistance of a certain town against his legions, all he did was just massacre the town. These are not applicable anymore. The leaders that we need are those who are forward-looking, have appreciation for technology, people who can derive a consensus out of the nation towards the achievement of our national goals, and just people who represent the best in us. Those are the people that personally I'd like to lead our country.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I think because of your massive experience and expertise, we have cross our questions here, and for your indulgence, no. So there is another one. There's another one here. I think this is about sound investment, no, in the Philippines. I would like to ask, what is the current perception of foreign investors towards the Philippines?
It's mixed. It's from what I read and in my interactions with the economic officers, industrialists, it's mixed. They say that the Philippines has a lot of promise, has a lot of potential. The good things, but mainly they refer to the future. But on the other hand, they will say that it has peace and order problems. The cost of doing business is high, and it's true. They say that the cost of power is very high. So on the one hand, they say that we have very, very intelligent people, highly educated people, but then that's negated by factors that they claim to be negative. And that is your question kind of reflects also that we have one of the lowest FDIs, foreign direct investments among ASEAN countries. I forgot our ranking now, but we're at least at the middle. Out of 10 countries, maybe we are number 5 or maybe number 6. So that's quite a low number the last time I saw, because some countries are raking in FDIs, foreign direct investments. I think is raw money, real money poured into the national economy. It's not like the stock market investments where you can withdraw anytime. If there is instability, you can write a check and withdraw your money from the stock market. So that's not the investment that we want. What we want are FDIs, foreign direct investments. And I think it's it's really up to us to make our country attractive to foreign investors. The irony is our workers are good workers if they are in an environment where their talents are recognized. I will give you an example. It's not an investment related example, but it shows our attitude at treating our very skillful people. I'm sure you know the one of the youngest grandmasters in chess in the US now is So. The last name is So, S-O. He claims that he was not treated well in the Philippines. That's why he migrated to the United States and became one of the best chess players, if not of this time, of all time. And he's acclaimed worldwide. So how can a talent like that escape our country? Are we not good at spotting people? Or we just don't care because sometimes rank and privilege matters too much among us. So in investments, I don't know what to say. In the United States, during my assignment there, in most states, for example, I'm most familiar with is Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. In Virginia, if you would like to incorporate, there is just one piece of paper where you write the name of your corporation, initial capital stock, name of incorporator. One person can be an incorporator. One person, name of incorporator, address of the corporation, and then at that time, maybe $25 fee. You sign that. In those days, you just have to mail it. In 1 week, it comes back. You already have a corporation. Oh, how long do you incorporate in the Philippines? I am not saying that they are better. No, don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is there are modern ways now of doing that might be worth imitating, if that is the word, imitating or following. Because there are countries in the world that have been very, very poor, and they imitated the West, hook, line, and sinker. Example, Singapore. Singapore, if you go to Singapore, you're like in Western Europe. You're like you're in San Francisco. But can you say that the Singaporeans are a copycat of Westerners? I don't think so. They still have maintained their identity, but their manner of doing things, that's the one that's Westernized, which is a good approach because the West, they recognize the value of technology. They recognize the value of speed. On speed, I'll give you an example here how our conduct leads to very poor, a very poor way of doing things. For example, if you take a taxi or a jeepney, your aim there is to move as quickly as possible from point A to point B. Now, take the jeepney. If you ride a jeepney, the jeepney driver aims as much as possible to hit the stoplight as near as possible to the intersection where the stoplight is located. Why? Because he wants to load his jeep with passengers. But that's contrary to a fast or a speedy transportation, because you want to go past the traffic light as soon as possible. Try if you haven't tried taking a jeepney, try doing it again, and you will see the meaning of what I'm saying. So the premium for speed in certain countries is important. For example, they say we have one of the slowest internet speeds. I don't know about that, but I know that Cambodia and Laos, one of the tail enders in the ASEAN totem pole, are designing their internet speeds to be top of the line. So maybe in the next 2 or 3 years, they may equal our speed, if indeed our speed is quite low.
Thank you so much. I think premium what was mentioned that were very much related, no, to the ease of doing business, no, in the Philippines that were forwarded. One that is really on the right human capital investment, the infrastructures, and I think there's no bad in copying. What is important is we do the right system approach, no, in doing business in the Philippines. So thank you so much on that. And I
Thank
think,
you.
Ambassador, we have here one personal from Brian Pasigna. I think he's a seafarer right now in another country. He is working offshore. So he would like to ask, what is your perception towards maritime industry with regards of EU ship owners banning Filipinos seafarers if government cannot meet their standards? Thank you.
Yes, that was a burning issue as I was leaving Maritime and Ocean Affairs office before taking up my posting in Iraq. Let me recall the antecedents of that issue. I think way back, something like 14 or 12 years ago, we were already notified by EU member countries that the state of maritime education in our country has to be improved to attain their standards. Imagine, at least 10 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And they keep warning us every year because they, I think every other year, there is a big delegation from EU in their maritime industry commission there that goes around and looks at our maritime schools. And consistently, according to them, they found out that many of our schools are substandard. Sometimes we are very good at theory. They have good books. They have good, sometimes technology, even computers, etc. But they don't have the practical experience of really manning a vessel out to sea. Or if they do, it takes a long time before a particular midshipman or cadet, engine cadet, for example, to look at an engine of a big ocean-going vessel. That has been a problem, and I have to be honest with you. I don't know what remedies we. I'm sorry. One of the remedies that we thought of was to bring a delegation to Europe, and headed by Marina. Actually, Marina is the lead agency here. We are just coordinating the issues because they involve foreign governments, and speak with the head there and see if a timetable can be revised to accommodate the current administration that we are serving. So I'm sorry I'm not updated on the latest developments, but what I'm telling you is, what I can tell you is that if indeed we cannot remedy the situation, then they give figures on the number of jobs that we will lose if the standard of our schools are not up to par. So yeah, there's a danger there. It's no joke if one loses his job merely because of lack of certification. There are consequences, students going to school, children who are, the upkeep of the daily maintenance of the families back here. It's a very serious job. I cannot tell you how to solve it because it's been festering there for a long, long time. And the solution cannot be done overnight. It has to take also quite some time, at least years. Not exactly in the same number of years where the situation deteriorated, but I think it will take a few years, 2 or 3 years maybe, to find a remedy. And the remedy should also be one that is acceptable, if not voluntarily entered into and complied with by the school owners. I think it's not just the money that they gain out of enrollments, but if they are corporations, they should also have what is called the CSR, corporate social responsibility, of seeing to it that their trainees are of the highest caliber, worthy of the reputation of Filipinos to be excellent workers abroad. When I first read about this issue, actually I was surprised because whenever you go to countries that have Filipinos on board, like the Japanese, for example, they all have praises for Filipinos. Filipino captains, Filipino officers, Filipino ratings. But much later, I realized that even while still in the Philippines, the midshipmen who are slated to go to Japanese vessels are already taken care of by the Japanese. They give scholarships, they give practical training. For example, in PMMA, they already have slots there that eventually will be deployed aboard Japanese vessels. So way before the actual deployment, the Japanese already have plans for each and every midshipman. So I guess I do not have to tell you that that's the way the Japanese think. That's why they are prosperous. There are several steps ahead. So some of the Europeans, because they believe in us too much, maybe they are after the interview, after the CVs, they would say, "Oh, this is impressive." But then when they actually employ our seafarers, it's kind of different in reality. The application is different. So maybe they are more naive about our performance in school as compared to performance in reality. But I'm sorry, I cannot provide a solution.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think Marina will have to do something on that as a challenge.
I think so.
Ambassador here, I think there is one reflection from Erickson de Guzman. No?
Okay.
Looking at your co-ambassadors in across countries, how do you look at Philippines right now? No, there are a lot of massive developments ongoing, but yet we have a very limited mileage on media, or media has presented Philippines more on the fake news, corrupt practices. So I think Erickson would like to know how your co-ambassadors look at that way.
That's very unfortunate because I would think that just like what other countries say about themselves, I've heard this said among other diplomats also, that their own worst enemy is themselves. And that also applies to us. Sometimes our own worst enemy is ourselves. And but you cannot blame media for that, because that's how media thrives. Media wishes to propagate negativity because that is what sells. That is what actually attracts people to read the news item. But I think there are also responsible media in our midst, and I hope that they can also project good things for our country. And it's a good thing you asked that question, because in 1986, that's a long time, even before some of you may have been unborn yet at that time, I attended the Australian Diplomatic Training School in Canberra. That was I think that was a 4-month training program for entry-level diplomats, Australian, and we were embedded into those classes. And I noticed, and actually I reported this to the ambassador, the Sergey at the time. The ambassador was not present. I told him, sir, I've been already in the course for 2 weeks. So we've been making, I've been making a scan of the media. At that time, you have to read a real newspaper, you know, it's really a paper. And so I told the CDA, sir, the Philippines is extensively covered here, I said, in Canberra. But all the news that I get is negative. At that time, Marcos has just fallen, because that course started in June, I think, June up to October. And so I said, how come we don't have a drive to cleanse the negative perceptions of the Philippines? So he said, give me an example. So I, I cited the news items that I saw. If you read them, actually looking back, they were not really true, you know, with the passage of time, of course. But in those days, you seem to panic in a way, because they are trying to picture the Philippines as an unstable country. It has no, it has a very subdued government that cannot enforce its writ throughout the country. And also, one of the worst is they say that the New People's Army, the Communist Party of the Philippines, is gaining headway in the countryside, and whether we like it or not, it might fall soon, something like that. So in those days, as you are reading those items, you will really fear for the safety and well-being of your country. But of course, looking back, nothing happened. And I just think that the media is simply like that. I don't know how to counteract it, other than saying that some things are not true. But when you make a rebuttal, and if they find it with merit, they will only print the one line of your rebuttal. So it's not the same as the headline that they make. So I don't know. We just live with it, I think. But if we are better, there's nothing in the way of a real, accurate, true, and progressive coverage of our situation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ambassador.
Yeah.
Doc Leo?
Yes. Yes, Doc Matt. I'm very excited with the exchange and responses. And I hope that we will have more office time next time when his ambassador is back in the Philippines again. Because I think he's due for traveling again.
I cannot. I was not able to hear the question or remark very well. There was. I don't know if that's interference or it's. I did not hear what you said, sir.
Nagkakaroon ng echo, hindi ko alam kung bakit nag-double sound.
Yeah, it's
Doc Leo, maybe
reverberating.
because you're also live in the Google Meet. Oo.
Medyo nawala.
Oh, yeah. I think that's better. Yeah.
That's
Yeah, go
better.
ahead, sir.
Yeah. Ambassador, with all those views and everything, I would like to ask you, perhaps this is my last question. In your post, in your current post in Baghdad, any potential cooperation with the government of Iraq and the Philippines that could be beneficial economically for us?
Okay. There is a pending proposal for a labor agreement, but it's been withheld since 2018, I believe, because we imposed a ban on deployment of workers in Iraq, and because of the security situation there. And so right now, no Filipino worker is allowed to enter Iraqi territory. And to me, that's if I would say I'd like to have that ban lifted, I would have to speak with many agencies. Not least of which, of course, is my own department, OWA, PUA, DOLE, and I don't think I will get consensus about allowing Filipino workers to Iraq, because I sincerely believe that mechanisms can be set in place to assure or at least mitigate the seriousness of the threat there and to assure their safety. No safety can never be 100% assured, as you all know, in the security industry. But there is a sense where I get a feeling that if certain steps, if certain mechanisms are undertaken, then we can resume the deployment of workers in Iraq. But this has to be taken by the entire government as its own decision, not just our own there in the embassy, because Iraq is the third or fourth biggest producer of oil in the world. It is sitting on oil deposits beneath their territory that's still not really tapped in its entirety. So some of the areas are dangerous, like in Kirkuk, but once they get their act together, they also have internal problems. The divisiveness I mentioned to you at the start of my talk is also very much evident in them, because the truth is, during the time of Saddam, Iraq was a very secular state, but as he knew that his end was nearing, he injected religious elements into the society, like putting a Quranic verse in their flag, which was non-existent before. And so when he fell, he was executed eventually. The innate tendencies of the Iraqis to be disunified all came out in the open. So the Sunnis began to assert themselves. The Shiites assumed power in government. The Kurds have always maintained their independence in the north. So it just blew up in their faces, and that's one thing that we also have to watch out. But in terms of agreements that can be harnessed to help the development of the Philippines and also of Iraq, of course, the potential is very strong. There are many wealthy Iraqis. Most of them are abroad. They maintain houses there, and they just go there every now and then during Muslim holidays, then go back to where they have other second or third houses. So many of them are in neighboring Jordan. Some have houses in Germany, in the United States, so in Canada. So they are very, very wealthy. Some have villas in Baghdad or elsewhere in Iraq, and they just put them out for rent to expats. There are many, and they are quite intelligent people. In early 60s, Iraq's universities were in the top 10 in the world, about between 60 to 63, something like that. They have attained a level of excellence that the British wanted them to attain. So they're very good. They are fluent speakers in English, but I think they are losing it now because of misplaced nationalism. Speaking English is an indication of pro-Western or pro-American leaning. So they would rather speak Arabic. Their domestic situation has to be fixed first before we enter into any agreement, because we don't know what form of government we'll be talking to in the next few years. They will have elections this coming October 10, and let's see how that will unfold.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Before I give the floor to Dr. General Ramon Santos for his synthesis and takeaways on this so productive discourse, let me just have the two last questions. I hope you don't mind, Ambassador. Okay,
Sure.
This one, I think this is coming from the experience of Rolin Biason. I would like to ask your opinion on how we are going to deal or how we are going to help our OFW, especially our domestic helpers, to have their one day off in some Arab countries, or strictly impose what is in the agreement between two countries. Experience myself, sir, most Arab did not acknowledge that agreement. One of the reasons why most of our domestic helpers suffer a lot.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. Thank you for that question. That's indeed a problem, especially in the Middle East. We focus the question on Iraq itself. It's quite a gargantuan task to enforce that because of the security situation. Most of our OFWs there are in compounds, big compounds, over which we don't have any access. And officially, there is a ban on deployment. So if you go to those places and enforce the agreements, and by the way, no agreement is enforced yet with Iraq. So, but if we attempt to enforce Philippine law, I don't know how the Iraqis will feel, because many of the OFWs there pass through third countries before deployment to Iraq, which is actually illegal. And we don't know how where they are. We don't know where they live. Suddenly, they just because of maltreatment, sometimes they just escape and take a taxi and ask the taxi to bring them to the embassy. They bring them there, and we find them in the embassy gates. That's how we cannot pinpoint where they are. That's one of our problems. So right now we have in the embassy about 9 or 10 we call them wards, because we have a section there for them, and the government is paying for their upkeep, for their food, for their stay, and eventual repatriation to the Philippines. So yeah, that's a very relevant question, except that it's tough. One way of going about it is to enforce Philippine law through the agencies that deploy them. Let us put pressure on the agencies because they are the ones who determine where they go. They know who their bosses are, and
Dali lang, di pa kami tapos.
we can remove their accreditation if they put or deploy these workers in places where their security and their well-being is not assured. But as I said, in Iraq, the workers that are deployed there come from third countries. For example, they get out of Philippine immigration and find themselves in Dubai. And from Dubai, they get deployed to Baghdad, let's say. And we don't know how they came, how they arrived, who their boss is. Some go via Kuala Lumpur, Hong Kong, and other third country intermediate destinations before being flown to Iraq. In the other countries, like I cannot speak really for Saudi, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, in the Gulf areas, because I think their procedures there are more established. It's easier to coordinate with the Ministry of Labor there and their equivalent of the POEA. But having said all this, here is one thing that I can be proud of with what we do in the embassy, and that's on the issue of the abduction of people, for especially of women, for exploitation. We were able to extricate many of our women, and of course with the help of the local authorities and Western powers who help us monitor the situation of the workers, because it's not only us that it's not only the Philippines that has a problem. There are also Indians, Bangladeshis, Sri Lankans, occasional Indonesians. There are other nationalities that have similar problems to ours. In fact, if I may say so, we are probably one of the more systematic in approaching these problems. But deployment is zero, so it's just a matter of monitoring them through the agencies. I hope we get their cooperation, but an agency will not acknowledge that it has deployed people in Iraq, because it is against its interest. It is contrary to the law. So the best there is the boss there in Iraqi territory. But how do you find the boss? Do you knock at every door? The compounds there are big. The gated communities there are huge. So do they wish their privacy be invaded by a foreign government? These are the issues, but the way of meeting the issue is to keep our lines open. All our assistance to nationals people have their telephones available 24 hours a day, and so every call we get, it's always a time is of the essence, because an escaping OFW has a very narrow window before he or she gets detected. So if she calls the embassy and she says that she needs to avail herself of the services of this embassy by seeking succor at the embassy, within an hour or at the most 2, we should be able to extricate her. And we have been quite successful with the cooperation of the host government, our own local employees, and of course with the initiative also of the OFW herself.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I think this is our last for today. Good
Okay.
morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning.
In the case of CPP, NPA, NDF, what
Okay.
would be your best suggestion to end the 50-year war with this communist terrorist group? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you for that question. That should cap the day. There are two things that I want done if if I'm the one deciding things. One is if we can possibly can is to defeat the CPP, NPA, NDF militarily. We should prove to them that we are better in their own game. That's the military/security approach. Second, I would like the political approach that many countries have taken, especially in Europe, and even Iraq, by the way. In the countries that I've mentioned in Europe, the Communist Party is legal. The Communist Party is legal. They can run for office. Even in Russia, of course, they still play a role, but they are no longer a force to reckon with in the former communist states. So if they commit a violation of their status as legal entities, for example, if they bear arms, then that's illegal possession of firearm. That's a crime. That's punishable. So we deal with them according to the law that we have on firearm, on illegal assembly, on rebellion. But the party itself, as long as it is not taking a concrete action to harm individuals, especially government forces, government officials, I think they should let them be. Because whatever they do that is contrary to our regulations on peace and order, those are crimes. Those are police matters. And the ideology of communism is always in the mind. So under our law, a state of mind cannot be punished. It's concrete acts that are punishable. So if one of us here in this forum thinks like a communist, I don't think that's an offense in the revised penal code or in the amendments to the law. But if you begin to hurt someone, if you begin to ambush government troops, that's a crime. That's the one punishable. So that's where the second remedy that I think of, which is to defeat them in their own game, is to be better at them in the field, and to show that it doesn't pay to go up the mountains. Just the other day, there was this young lady who got killed in a battle with government troops, and it's such a waste. It's such a waste of talent for a UP. I don't know if he graduated. She graduated from UP, but I understand she was a poet, and we have a shortage of these types of artists in our country, and I don't know what went to her mind. It's probably and the home is also a critical factor in this. If if our homes inculcate the values that are essential to civic consciousness, civic mindedness, then I think the act of joining rebellion is a taboo among the youth. And but militarily, we should defeat them. That's one way of battling them in the countryside, and diffuse their ideology by making them come out in the open and run for office if they want to. My personal view, the way I saw it in other countries, even in the US, the Communist Party of the USA is there. It has an office, it has a phone number. In Baghdad, I pass by it almost every day. The Communist Party of Iraq, they have become irrelevant in those societies because the people don't like them, that don't like what they want to happen in their societies, because what they want is, if you follow Marxist theory, equality of all, and but you cannot attain perfect equality in society. It's what you input that you get back. So as long as we continue to look at them with fearful eyes, with if you can take a look at them with the ideological threat that they pose without educating our people, we should expose them. The people should actually, we read Marxist and Leninist theory only in schools. But if you read what they say, they're no longer relevant. Maoist theory, for example, that was devastated by Deng Xiaoping, by China. Marx is a German. Lenin is a German. But what is Germany now? The Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, is now Russia. The successor in interest is Russia. And Russia is as capitalist as can be. The demonization of the word communist only exists in our mind, but academically that can be true. But in reality, how can you work for everybody and then you only have a certain portion or share of the production when you exerted a lot of effort in, let's say, rice production? Then you divide the produce equally. There's no logic into it. So there's no sense in the communist theory if you are a thinking person. But if you say, oh, that's dangerous, they're going to kill people, the ideological danger we're attributing them to by them, massacring our forces. It doesn't have to be a communist to be able to do that. The fascists were also able to do that. Even the Crusades during the Middle Ages massacred people. Even Zarqawi massacred Christians. You don't have to have a communist point of view to become a danger to society. But that's the illegal part. If you only preach that, to each according to his contribution, to each according to his wants, parang ganon. They have a theory that the state will wither away after the socialist states will become communist, and then the state will wither away, and then we'll all become equals. How can that happen? How can that happen? How old is the world? It's, I think, 3 to 5 billion years. Has it ever happened that there was perfect equality? Even in paradise, there was no equality because the apple was offered to Eve first. They did not share the apple and ate the apple equally. Di ba? So I think let's just open the eyes of our people about the lack of logic of their ideology. It has been proven. It has been proven that it's not a good basis for governance. Diba? Any more questions?
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I think the modern challenge of utopian is the equity.
Where did it ever exist?
Yeah.
Where did utopia ever exist?
So to fruitfully end our open forum and sharing productively, to this session that we have right now, may I have the privilege to call on Dr. Ramon Santos. Morning, Doc.
Hi, good morning once again, Your Excellency. Good morning. Thank you, Doc Malakaging and City Santiago, and to our students. Thank you so much for attending, and to our guests from the retiree section and your colleague, Ambassador. They are all here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It is my singular honor to express our appreciation to you, Your Excellency. So, Your Excellency, Ambassador Generoso Calogne, sir, maraming po salamat. Thank you
Anytime.
so much
Basta kayo.
sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much for enlightening us today on how the international community look on us, how they see us, and sadly, how we look also on ourselves.
Yeah.
And because of this new knowledge, we have greater appreciation of the international relations with them. How we wish our strategic thinkers to use it accordingly in crafting our foreign relations policies. We have gained new and fresh knowledge from your presentation today, and we are truly grateful. We are excited and looking forward to have you one more time, more engagement with you in the near future. Once again, sir, salamat. We
Thank you.
appreciate the great efforts of Dean Leocadio Santiago for organizing this much-needed webinar. Your Excellency, on behalf of President Junipen Gowan of the Philippine Christian University and the whole academic community, hello?
Hello.
Nawala. Yes, sir. On the whole community, please accept this appreciation certificate together with our admiration for your achievements in the service of our beloved country. And on my personal level, sir, we are so proud of you as we claim you as one of our own in the special warfare community of the armed forces of the Philippines. Thank you, sir. And we wish you fair winds, and may the road ahead of your endeavor be always with gladness. And I now read the citation. Philippine Christian University Certificate of Appreciation is awarded to Ambassador Generoso DG Calogne for his invaluable insights as resource speaker during the discourse session on current international perspective towards the Philippines, a webinar for the Graduate Studies of Philippine Christian University, given this 3rd day of September 2021, Manila, Philippines, signed Junifen Gauwan, PhD, President, signed Leocadio SC Santiago, PhD, Dean College of Criminology. Sir, again, on behalf of everyone, thank you so much. Thank you. Salamat, sir.
Thank you. May small detail lang. Yung last name ko should be Calonge. Nagkapalit yung G at saka N.
Oh, sir. Calonge.
Calonge. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Sincere apologies, Mr.
Just let me know.
Si Dean Santiago ang have the last word.
Okay. Please.
Classmate, as always, the class have not really went wrong when they embrace you as our part of our class and member of our class. I hope that we can invite you again
Yes.
to talk about events happening outside of our country. And I'm pretty sure you have a lot of things to share with us. And also, I would admit that I hope things will work out well on the days ahead, not only for us, but especially for you who are in an area, while a prestigious rank, but in a more or less challenging country to be an ambassador to. And hope to see you soon. And
Dean, can I say something?
Yes, please.
Baka hindi alam ng mga kasama natin si Ambassador Generoso is a top notcher of the Scout Ranger class. That is the toughest. That is the most difficult course in the Armed Forces of the Philippines. I know dahil kami ni Dean Santiago, doon lang kami sa second toughest yung sa Special Forces. But the Scout Ranger is really the even in the whole Armed Forces community sa buong mundo, basta ikaw ay Ranger, hindi nila alam yun.
Salamat.
So,
Salamat.
actually, kompleto yung yung character ni Ambassador. A philosopher, a warrior, a scholar, a practitioner, and a great public servant. Sa totoo.
Thank you. Thank you.
With that talent, I hope, classmate, Your Excellency Ambassador Generoso Calogne, you will serve more and longer for our country. That is our prayers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. Sige.
Maybe we can have a photo opportunity. So, if you can
Paki-PM na
open
lang, classmate, yung address mo.
Yeah, I'll do it. Sayang yung merienda. Okay, so yeah, anytime that you feel you have a need for my services, let me know. It's just a matter of scheduling it.
Yeah.
Kasi I'm going back to Baghdad in about 10 days, and even if I am there, I can entertain invitations like this. Just note that you are 5 hours ahead of Baghdad. So if it is 12 noon here, it's only 7 o'clock in the morning there. So if you're conscious of the time, we can do business.
Thank you so much.
Nandito kanina si Professor Roland Bayalan. I don't know if he's here. Actually, under his office, yung isang pinag-usapan natin, classmate, sa office nila, china-channel ko.
Okay.
Again,
yes.
thank you so much. And
Okay.
Can we share our
faces.
Photo.
have a photo op? Okay,
Yeah, please.
I have 4 screens here, so we can
Okay.
smile around 10 seconds. Okay.
Okay.
Screen 1. Okay. Next, I have another screen. Smile. Third screen. And then the last. Okay.
Actually, for the information of everybody, aside from Zoom, which limited our participation to 100, we also have participants in Google Meet. From there is more than 50 also attended.
Oh, wow.
So everybody was so excited about the presentation of our Excellency Ambassador Calonge.
Thank you.
I hope everyone can click on our exit survey so we can have our e-certificate for this session. Thank you so much, Ambassador.
Okay. Thank you. Ingat kayo.
Bye-bye po.
Be safe and God bless
Great day
us
ahead.
all.
Stay safe. Be safe. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, Doc Leo.
Bye.
Thank you.
Vamos.